Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So today we have had a little bit of a tidal wave of new rules and weapon profiles for the upcoming Admech Codex, and there is a lot to be excited about if you are an Admech player. Some of their guns look like they are going to be incredibly killy across the battlefields of 9th edition. So let's dive in and take a quick look at what Games Workshop have shown off and what you Admech players have to look forward to. First up, we have the main weapon of the Skitarii Rangers, the Galanic Rifle. This used to be something of a pretty forgettable, bog standard infantry weapon, rapid fire 1, strength 4, no AP and 1 damage. It did have a bit of extra range at 30 inches and was also AP -1 on 6s to wound, but for the most part it was really forgettable amongst the sea of bolt rifles, shuriken catapults and splinter rifles and that kind of thing. Now however, it has a definite role and has become a heavy 2 strength 4 rifle with -1 AP all the time and 1 damage. And seeing as how your rangers were typically the squad you would sit back on a home objective with, outfitting one of them with the awesome Arquebus special weapon option, I think that these have become a lot better in that now they always get those 2 shots, not just within half range, so you can feel a bit better about just leaving them sitting back on your side of the board, holding an objective, and still be putting out those 2 shots a turn. It's always really been the Vanguard that you would have moving up, getting into closer range, so it is a nice little buff to the Rangers as a troops choice, essentially doubling their output in 90% of the situations you will find them in. The constant -1 AP is also really nice and just simplifies the gun a little bit in my mind, gives you one less thing to be watching out for and thinking about as you're rolling your wound rolls. So overall, it's a very solid little buff to this weapon, and one which is going to, I think, really benefit the cheap little ranger squads that you use just to keep in your home deployment and, zone out enemy deep strikers or just hold on to a objective near to your deployment. Just keeps them nice and cheap, but also allows you to maximize the output from them. The arc rifle is another weapon that the rangers could take, but also one of the special options for your other Skitarii troops choice, the Vanguard. And this has seen an absolutely massive glow up, becoming quite possibly one of the better anti-vehicle weapon options for a troops choice in the entire game. The current profile of a 24-inch rapid fire 1, strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage gun going up to D3 damage against vehicles was pretty meh. Like, it wasn't bad, it wasn't a terrible gun, but it wasn't anything super exciting. Now, in the new much improved profile, they have not only gained an extra 6 inches of range, pushing them up to 30 inches, they've gained an additional pip of AP, bringing them to AP -2, which is really fantastic for getting those 3-up saves down to a much riskier 5-up, and their damage has jumped from 1 to a very nice D3 all the time. I would have preferred damage 2. Again, I like the consistency, but you can't really complain about a basic infantry gun going from 1 damage to D3. But more than that, these were always the guns you wanted to be shooting at vehicles with because it went from 1 damage to D3 damage. Now, this has been reflected by getting a boost from the D3 damage that they do normally. That goes up to a flat 3 when you are shooting against vehicles, which is a massive improvement on the old D3, which was much swingier. But also, in addition to that, not only does their damage go up to that flat 3 against vehicles, but they also always wound vehicles on an unmodified 4-up. Now this is incredible, meaning that even against things like land raiders or repulsors or even knights, your Vanguard squad can stand a really decent chance of pushing through a good number of wounds against even the toughest of vehicles, and doing a flat 3 damage to them is really going to add up over time. As it stands right now, you can take a few of these weapons in a squad, but like the big changes to how the Death Guard Plague Marine squads could be outfitted, this may well be subject to change. But that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if even in a small 5-man min squad of Skitarii, you can take at least a couple of these. So if you want a really nice cheap squad to run around hunting vehicles, this is going to be a really points efficient way of doing it, and it's going to be really effective as well, because no matter what the toughness of the enemy vehicle is, you know that you're going to be wounding it on fours, pardon me, and that you're going to be doing that flat 3 damage. The article does also state that arc melee weapons will be getting a slight buff as well, so the close combat options for things like the breaches, I believe, have the arc claw as a melee option, so that will make them as well even better at killing vehicles when they get into combat with them, but they don't show off anything particular. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something similar though, going to a nice flat amount of damage when they wound vehicles. They also mentioned that Rust Stalkers are going to be getting a very nice improvement, with things like the Transonic Blades going to AP-3 and Transonic Razors getting a bump to AP-2, which is huge considering they are both AP-0 at the moment. So that is going to make these guys much more viable at getting through tougher armor compared to how they are now. We don't know if there's going to be any other changes to their strength or anything like that. They don't go into any detail. We'll just have to wait and see, but it is really nice to see, because the Rust Stalkers and the Infiltrators are some of the coolest models I think in the game at the moment, and I've always loved seeing them on the table, so fingers crossed they do get a bit of a buff and are good enough to see more play on the battlefield now. As we've seen in some of the other previews, the Cognos weapons have also had a very nice buff across the board, with the Cognos Heavy Stubber and the Cognos Autocannon gaining extra shots, going to Assault 4 and Assault 6 instead of the current Heavy 3 and Heavy 4. As I mentioned, this is likely so they could do away with the rule that let you advance with a -2 to hit penalty on the Cognos weapons, which, you know, in current 9th edition is just a needlessly kind of complex rule. Making them Assault just simplifies that. It gives you one less thing to worry about, means that you can advance and you can still shoot them with that -1 penalty. It just makes it a bit easier all round and gives the profile a bit more of a clean, simplified look. The Cognos Flamer has, as expected, also gone up to a 12-inch range in line with other Flamer weapons, but notably it has gone up to D6 plus 2 auto hits now instead of D6, which is really quite nice and means that you will be getting at least 3 hits now when you fire it into an enemy squad, instead of suffering the dreaded 1 on your D6 dice roll, which I have to say I seem to get all the time when I'm rolling a flamer weapon into an enemy. The Cognos las cannons, as we saw, haven't gone up in the number of shots they've received, but as we covered previously, they have gone up to a very nice D3 plus 3 damage instead of D6, which again, I will go on about this again and again and again, is really welcome. It gives you that reliability, which I think is one of the key things that people want in general, but especially on a gun which only has 1 or 2 shots. So overall, I think the Cognos weapons are one of the biggest improvements from what we've seen in the Codex. They are really quite good across the board, and noticeably better than the non-Cognos versions of these weapons that other armies have access to. Like if you compare it to a regular heavy stubber or a regular flamer or a regular autocannon, these are much nicer in comparison, so I think you will probably be paying a few extra points for them, but I do think overall it is going to be worth it. Last up, we have some news for the Kataphron Breaches and the Kataphron Destroyers. The Torsion Cannons, which were previously really quite bad, with a 24-inch range, strength 8, -4 AP, D6 damage, shot, like 1 shot. They were incredibly swingy, and on a platform which only has a ballistic skill of 4+, you really don't want to be relying on, a single shotgun which then has a D6 damage profile. That is just way too much randomness for, I think, almost anyone to consider worthwhile. They've had a nice buff, doubling their range to a much nicer 48 inches compared to the 24 they have currently, which is incredibly welcome. But they've also gained the same D3 plus 3 damage buff which numerous other D6 damage guns have. I still think it's going to be interesting to see what their cost is and whether they're still 1 shot, because if that is the case, I'm still not entirely sure they're going to see much use, especially when you consider that the other option for breaches is the heavy arc rifle, which, going back to this earlier in this video, if the changes to the normal arc rifle are any indication, the heavy arc rifle is going to be incredibly powerful by comparison indeed. And so whether a 1-shot strength 8 gun, even doing D3 plus 3 damage, is going to be worth it over that. I'm not sure. We'll have to see what the points cost is. At the moment, I'm still dubious, and I think that probably you will be taking the heavy arc rifle over the torsion cannon, even with this buff. The final change noted is on the Cataphron destroyers, where the plasma culverins have had a very slight amendment just to state that ones to hit now only cause a mortal wound instead of outright slaying the model. Again, this is something that we've seen on a few higher value models, and whilst it makes sense to me to still have that insta-kill mechanic on things like Hellblasters and even arguably in Scepters, I think it is a nice change to see for the destroyers. They are an incredibly expensive model, so losing a whole 50-point unit to a single dice roll of a 1 was very painful to see. So I don't think we will see much more in terms of a change to the plasma culverin. It's going to be your standard plasma / overcharged plasma profile, I imagine, but it is very nice to see that rolls of 1 won't insta-kill your 50-point model anymore, purely as a quality of life change and also a bit of a change to make you feel a bit safer about overcharging. I do think that this change is a welcome one. So there we go, some very big, very scary changes coming to the weaponry of the Admech. I think the Vanguard and the Ranger squads are going to be very happy with a lot of what we have seen here today, and obviously anything with a Cognos weapon is going to be getting a very nice boost as well. I do think that there may well be some not insignificant point changes through the Admech Codex in line with some of these adjustments, but to be honest, I would much rather pay slightly more and have a weapon that actually does something, such as the Galanic Rifle changes, rather than having a free weapon which never actually does anything. But what do you think of these changes? Are you excited to see what other weapons get a bit of a boost in the Admech Codex? And what other units are you looking forward to seeing and using when you get to unleash the forces of the Mechanicus on the table? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I will catch you later, guys.